We are in D.C., as you know, for the President's State of the Union address this evening. Joining us now, 4 members of the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. Chairman Darrell Issa, fellow Republican Congressman Jason Chaffetz, ranking member Elijah Cummings, friend of the show, been on many times, great to see everyone here, and fellow Democrat John Tierney. And so many things on the docket, so many things to talk about. Let me start with you, Congressman Issa. What do you want to go with? We're going to have Dan Ackerson on to talk about the Volt, right, and the controversy there. We've got countrywide. We've got you guys on. Look at this. That's an aisle. You're over here, and the Democrats are over here.
Joe, you seated us.
We did see you, but we're in the seat where people get grilled normally. But we do want to get onto the CFPB at some point too, and hear what I imagine will be disparate opinions on how that went. But start with wherever you want to, Chairman.
Well, perhaps we should start with that, if you will, the questions of the recess appointment. Our committee is different than every other committee. We don't have a broad jurisdiction for legislation, but we do have a couple of areas that we really own, and the government organization and reorganization is one of those, which also includes every time a law, a regulation is proposed, goes through a process and is passed, it's our obligation to make sure it's legally done and binding. And so we will be narrowly looking at these recess appointments for what happens if the court overturns them, what will be the impact on the rule of law relative to all the things done under somebody's watch, if you will, if their watch was not legal and constitutional. That's one of the areas that we go to. Obviously, the president's wanting to do some reorganization. He wants authority to do it. Comes through our committee. You mentioned the Volt. The Volt is one of those things that while you're doing a plan that Mr. Cummings and I worked together on and approved jointly, the committee approved the plan for what we were going to do, you do that plus things that come along, including the situation on one of the highest priorities of the president, of the administration, and quite frankly, something that General Motors was very proud of, but it appears as though perhaps there was political influence in getting it to market less than safe.
Is there something that will be done by Republicans to still try to rein in Attorney General Cordray, or is he, what is he, Secretary Des? What is he now? What's his title? I call him Attorney General from Ohio, so I remember. But there's bills pending where, is it still possible there will be some oversight of him, I guess?
Well, we tend, even though we have an intergovernment component to our work, it's fairly limited, and we generally try to work primarily on, if you will, the knitting that's for us. And our committee, and Mr. Cummings will speak in a minute, our committee can't deal with all the things we'd like to deal with, all the things that we think we could make an impact, and that other committees don't have the time or the jurisdiction to work on. So is it likely in the next 9 months? Well, we're dealing with a post office that literally is going bankrupt, that is now insolvent, but just waiting for that final day when cash flow runs out. Are we going to have to put that ahead of a lot of other things? Yes. There are some areas that our committee has unique jurisdiction on that have to come first. And although the post office isn't the sexy one you came here to talk about, the idea that an institution since our founding is now financially insolvent, losing money, even though it has a mandate not to, and refuses to be reorganized and lobbies against its own reforms to correct that, yeah, that's an area that'll probably get pushed to the front while others get, if you will, put behind.
Congressman Cummings, I know you have some issues and some things that you'd like to work with. You're the ranking member on the committee, and you've brought some issues that you have not seen eye to eye with the other side of the aisle.
I'm certainly concerned. We just watched the debate last night in Florida, and a number of questions centered around foreclosure, people losing their houses. As you know, Americans over the last few years have lost anywhere between $7 and $11 trillion with regard to this issue. It's a major issue, and it's one where the chairman and I really thanked him for it, agreed that we would take this on. All of the research has shown that the banks and servicers have done an abysmal job with regard to these foreclosures. In many instances, they have admitted to unethical conduct. They have admitted to robo-signings. They have admitted to things that in my state would get you disbarred. But yet and still, we have not effectively addressed those issues. That's a serious kind of thing. We've had literally hundreds now, I guess 118 hearings, over 200 requests for documents, and not one, and subpoenas, and we have not had one single person to come before us who's responsible for this. I mean, I'm talking about the bankers. So we've got to address that. And as far as Mr. Cordray is concerned, I applaud the president for what he did. My constituents are tired. They're tired. They feel as if they are not being properly protected. They believe that, and they look at me and say, Cummings, you are over that Oversight Committee. What are you guys doing to protect us from predatory lending? From the kinds of abuses that brought us to the recession that we're in right now. So, yeah, we've got a lot of work to do, and I'm sure we will be about it. We'll address the post office. I agree with Chairman Issa. That is a very important issue, and that we will deal with it. We'll deal with it effectively.
That penny didn't fix it? I thought, wasn't it just yesterday? That was our news.
Say that again?
That penny didn't do it.
The increase in the postage stamps
yesterday of the penny. That's not going to...
Doesn't get you 15 billion.
Yeah, it doesn't get there.
Doesn't get there. Is there a number that would do it, that would get us there, a free market number? What would do it?
There is a free market number. As I said, they're losing $14 to $15 billion a year. It's a combination of deliver what people want at a price they're willing to pay. In some cases, we've restricted what the post office can charge for various classes of mail. But the biggest challenge is there are about 660,000 workers at the post office. In the private sector, there would be about 400,000. And it's not a debate about whether we need to get to that number. It's how we get there. Do we get there by inducing retirements and finding a way to trim that workforce? Or do we wait for people to retire from an organization that has 3 full-time employees that are 98 years old? Literally, not a talking point. We have a problem at the post office that it can't seem to shrink on its own fast enough. No. As a result, the biggest problem is we're paying people who we don't really need and not doing the reorganizations we should.
Are we going to see post offices closed in some smaller towns, and are we going to see delivery on Saturday still? Because that's what most constituents probably want to know.
And Becky, that's a good point. The Saturday delivery has been hotly contested. The truth is that when I was born, we delivered 7 days a week and twice on Monday through Friday. It was a time in which we really relied on every day having to get mail, and businesses had that twice a day because they wanted the morning mail and the afternoon mail, and they processed. Today we're in an internet age in which the mail is for less than it used to be. You can now do documentation and contracts. You can buy and sell billion-dollar entities over the internet. So is there a reason for the post office? Absolutely. Do we need 6-day delivery? I personally don't believe so. But in the bill that we moved out of our committee that I believe really needs to move, what we did was we said that's one of the options. It saves a big chunk of money, about $3.3 billion. But I'll tell you something that's not known by the public widely. If we simply had everybody go to a box at the front of their house or right at the corner of the street, like many people do, actually the majority do, if everybody did that, we'd save $5.5 to $6 billion. Just the arcane idea that the postman walks up and sticks it inside a chute of some homes, but not the majority of homes, that saves more money. That's one of the transitions, along with a more modern, more efficient fleet and others that need to happen. But I will tell you the direct answer to most people, processing center reform, eliminating some of the 500 processing centers and streamlining those, actually saves more money by far than closing post offices themselves.
If I might, just on this, one of the things that we're missing totally here is the overpayment, overfunding of the pension fund, which I notice that some people just don't want to talk about, but it's a serious number. It's billions of dollars, and I think if we start there, we take the biggest chunk of resolving this issue and move on. There's serious things that have to be resolved and a lot of different ideas, but my businesses in my community want delivery of mail on Saturday. A lot of people in my district want delivery of the mail on Saturday, and they also understand that this is a service that has great value to the American public, yet we don't pay a dime of taxpayer money. At one of the hearings that we had, there was testimony from the Postal Service that it was $3 billion a year of value to the American taxpayer, yet taxpayers pay nothing into the Postal Service. So we should start with the pension overfunding and work from there and then try to work around. But I think we should take a serious look at reserving the Saturday delivery for our businesses and for many of the people that live in our districts.
I want to return Congressman Cummings quickly to I guess it would be Director Cordray. Yes. Do you worry that anything he tries to do is going to be challenged in courts based on the way?
I'm sure there will be challenges, but the fact is that the president got the okay from the Attorney General, and a lot of people complain about these recess appointments, and but Reagan.
There was no. They would say there was no recess in this appointment.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, but Reagan had averaged 30,
right.
And Obama's averaging 10. President
right.
Obama's averaging 10. The fact is that I think the president had to act. As you know, there's a certain trigger that comes when the head of that agency is appointed. Whereby they can look at payday loan establishments and things of that nature. And so we need to have that. The banks have actually been complaining. They said, well, wait a minute, there's nobody, you're putting us under a very powerful microscope, but you're not looking at payday loans and all these other folks who are dealing with money and dealing with our constituents. So, again, I think the president made the right decision. Again, one of the things that this committee is supposed to be about is protecting our people, trying to make sure that government works for them. As I've said to audiences many times, it's very important to me that government works properly for my constituents. They need for government to work properly. Right. And so, again, here we have an agency that has been set up to protect the American people and protect every single one of our constituents. And we're getting a lot of pushback on that. And keep in mind, the Senate failed to appoint Mr. Cordray, not because he wasn't qualified. As a matter of fact, they said he was a great guy. Said he was a well-qualified fella. They just don't like the structure of this organization. And by the way, the structure it has been voted by the Congress of the United States of America, signing the law. It is the law, and we need to adhere to it.
Congressman Tierney, are Republicans in the Senate going to be disappointed they didn't confirm Elizabeth Warren because she takes a seat from Scott Brown?
I think they are.
What's the mood? Where are the poll numbers up there now? Do you have a?
I think it's neck and neck right now. Sometimes she's pulled ahead. Sometimes Scott is pulled ahead. But I think they're going to be disappointed because they lost a great talent.
Well, maybe she'd be a great talent for
Elizabeth Warren
Massachusetts.
has met with my bankers in my community. They were all excited about the prospect that she was taking a lot of care to listen to their voices and help them craft the new consumer protections. And I think that this appointment, Mr. Cordray, is going to be as good, and he's going to be capable on that. I think the underlying thing is this is consumer protection. It's beyond the pale that some down in Congress don't apparently think that protecting consumers is important. They'd rather protect the Wall Street banks that got us into the mess. And I think that when the law is passed, the American people expect that it's going to be implemented into law, not that there are going to be these asymmetric attacks on somebody to try to stop them from being appointed and stop the Consumer Protection Board
John,
from
why
taking
don't you
place.
just name the Republicans that don't want to protect people, the Republicans that don't care and that want to protect banks? I hear that all the time. One of the most important things that our committee is supposed to do is deal with the law, deal with what is right and has to happen. When we have that kind of discussion, you wonder why on Capitol Hill it's difficult. People want to, and our committee wants to see laws implemented.
But our committee isn't the committee that's approving these appointments. If you want to start with people, start right with the Senate that would not approve this recommendation, not because he wasn't qualified, but because they were upset with Dodd-Frank. And as I said, they're taking this asymmetric attack on it. Those are people I think you can start with and say, why aren't they just letting the law be implemented? We have no questions about his qualification. Let's put the man in place, and let's get the law to work.
I think Senator Chaffetz can speak on that.
There's no doubt that the Senate doesn't do their job clearly, absolutely. And with all due respect to what Congressman Cummings said, you don't get approval from the Attorney General. You get approval from the United States Senate. And we can't just ignore the Constitution because, well, they're not moving fast enough. Let's remember that Harry Reid controls the United States Senate. He's the one in charge. It's the Democrats that you got to look to. Today actually marks the 1,000th day that the United States Senate has failed to pass a budget. Now, America should be outraged about this. We cannot move forward. I didn't come here, quite frankly, to revitalize the post office. It's an important issue, and we'll do it. But jobs, the economy, our massive debt that we have out there, we're paying more than $733 million a day in interest on our debt. We deficit spend about $4 billion a day. And yet the United States Senate can't bring up and pass a budget in now 1,000 days. And then you wonder why the president appoints somebody and the Senate doesn't confirm and the president says, well, I'm just going to go my own way. That's not the way this country is supposed to run.
We do have some agreement across the aisle that the Senate is probably an evil body compared to the House and its wonderful work. But let me just say that, you know, the Senate has I think, a dysfunctional rule, the so-called 60-vote rule, that they can't close debate and move on to the principal issue without the 60 votes. That means that the Democrats having the majority can be stopped and slowed down by Republicans, which regularly happens over there. We all know it. And when Mitch McConnell takes the floor and says immediately after the last election that his goal in life is to make sure that President Obama doesn't serve a second term, I think we know that we can't put the blame all on Democrats for the Senate not working.
You had 60 for a while, but we're back to Scott Brown again.
Well, we had 60 for a very short while, but the fact is we don't have it now, and that closure rule the closure rule has been used far, far more of recent vintage than was in the past, and that's dysfunctional. I think it reflects badly on the whole Congress. The House does its work a lot of times. Things stop up over there.
You know,
but that is not
the founding fathers set it up that way so that things could be slowed down.
No, they did not.
So
the founding fathers didn't do the closure rule.
Checks and balances along the way.
Two houses to act differently, and they talked about the hot blood, if you will, of the House getting to the saucer and cooling. They did intend on the deliberative body, the other body, to be different. And candidly, even though I'm not a senator and I sometimes am frustrated with what happens there, if you simply have the same rules in the House and the Senate, you almost should be like Nebraska and be, you know, monocameral. The fact is, there is a difference. That difference has been there for our entire lives. I don't celebrate the difference, but I recognize that that difference is why the Senate does have to find different solutions than we do. Sometimes it works for the minority. I remember for my first 6 years when the Democrats were in the minority, they liked that. They liked the idea that they had to be compromised in the Senate to get things done. That's not uncommon. What's uncommon today is, and Jason Chaffetz said it very well, we don't have a Senate that's willing to, at the end of the day, bring up things like a budget and genuinely come to something that we need to have. And I think the American people, if you're going to be outraged with the Senate, be outraged that they're not willing to come to some sort of agreement on how we get from this huge deficit long before, hopefully, we end up like Greece, down to a sustainable level of government spending so that, and I'm going to Davos tomorrow, I'm going to tell you, I know that what they're going to be talking about is when are we going to pass Greece and these other countries in our percent of GDP that we owe, and it's going to be soon.
We do have a senator here today, but he's not going to defend the Senate. Senator Bob Corker, and the last time we spoke with him, he said he thinks it's the worst-run institution in America, too.
Well, the only thing to keep in mind is the 6 years that the chairman says that he was here and the Democrats were in the minority. I think that the cloture rule was invoked about 7% of the time. Recent vintage, it's been over 70% of the time, I believe. So that's quite a change, and that slows things down, and that's not the way the American people expected, or our founding fathers expected the institution to run.
But you do have a massive split just among the American public on how they see things. There's not a clear majority one way or the other.
We got to take a break, or we're going to end up like the post office, and they're going to pull our plug, so we don't need to do it.
Gentlemen, we want to thank you all very much for joining us. Yeah.
You guys got to be separated. I think we could have really, we could have gotten them going.
You know, if you come back next time, we'll put you right here.
I was there earlier, but I had to share the power with.
Yeah, the question is, which would be the ranking member?
We talked about that a little
bit. We were equal
co-chairs.
Yes.
But gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate all your time
this morning. Taking the time, and it's early, I know.
It is. And by the way, Squawk.